They pushed you to the edge of the room and waited. They whispered your name like it was already a memory. They watched you fall into the fire they lit and leaned back in their chairs, confident, satisfied, certain, because they were sure of one thing. You would scream, you would beg, you would explain yourself, you would defend your heart, you would shatter loudly enough for them to feel powerful. But you didn't. You stood in the flames, and you said nothing, and your silence confused them. They expected drama. They expected chaos. They expected you to fight back in the way they understood, loud, desperate, emotional. They thought pain would make you reckless. They thought betrayal would make you chase them for answers. They thought you would panic. After all, they underestimated you from the beginning. They thought your kindness was weakness, your patience was fear, your loyalty was dependency. They mistook your calm for fragility. So when they lied, when they excluded you, when they tried to make you feel small in rooms you once owned, they waited for the explosion. They waited for the text messages, the emotional paragraphs, the public confrontation, but you gave them silence. And it shook them more than any scream ever could, because silence is not emptiness. Silence is observation. Silence is discipline. Silence is power collecting itself. They expected you to react. You chose to respond with nothing, and that nothing, it became everything. At first, your silence wasn't strength, it was survival. You swallowed words that burned your throat. You clenched your jaw when your heart wanted to break open. You lay awake at night replaying every moment, every betrayal, every subtle disrespect. You asked yourself questions in the dark. Was it my fault? Should I have said more? Did they win? The silence felt heavy. It felt like carrying a storm inside your chest without thunder. But something strange happened in that quiet. Without the noise of defending yourself, without the distraction of explaining your worth, you began to hear something else, your own voice, not the voice shaped by their expectations, not the version of you that tried to fit their comfort, your real voice, and it whispered something powerful. You don't need to prove anything, so you stopped trying. While they laughed louder, you listened deeper. While they performed confidence, you built it in private. You turned inward like a seed buried under winter soil. From the outside, it looked like nothing was happening. It looked like you were inactive, passive, defeated, but underground. Roots were forming, strength was expanding, identity was anchoring. They mistook your quiet for weakness because they didn't understand growth that doesn't make noise. A tree does not scream while its roots spread. A mountain does not announce its formation. The ocean does not beg to be respected. It simply is, and you were becoming, slowly, painfully, powerfully. Every time they tried to provoke you and you didn't react, you won a silent battle inside yourself. Every time they expected you to defend yourself and you refused to lower your energy, you rose. Do you know what self-control feels like? It feels like holding fire in your hands and deciding not to burn anyone with it. That's strength, and they couldn't understand it. The shift began subtly. They started watching you more closely. They noticed you stopped explaining yourself. You stopped seeking validation. You stopped responding instantly. Your energy changed. It wasn't cold. It wasn't bitter. It was steady. Like a calm ocean after surviving a hurricane, and that steadiness terrified them. Because people who rely on chaos don't know how to handle calm. They tried again. They made passive comments. They tested boundaries. They attempted to trigger the old version of you. But that version? Gone. You didn't argue. You didn't defend. You didn't chase. You simply observed, and your silence echoed louder than their noise. Did they really think you would stay broken? Did they really believe pain would shrink you? No. Pain refined you. You began to move differently. Your walk carried intention. Your words became fewer but sharper. Your presence became heavier, not with anger, but with depth. You learned something in the fire. Not everyone deserves access to your emotions. That realization alone was a crown. You stopped attending arguments that were beneath you. You stopped entertaining gossip that drained you. You stopped explaining boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding you, and they felt it. The power dynamic shifted quietly. They used to feel tall when you reacted. Now they felt small when you didn't, because silence forces people to sit with themselves, and when you stopped providing emotional fuel, they were left alone with their own insecurities. That's when confusion turned into discomfort. They started asking, "Why are you so quiet?" But what they really meant was, "Why aren't you reacting the way we expected?" They tried to provoke you with sarcasm. They tried to bait you into conflict, but you had evolved. You realized something profound. Silence is not submission. Silence is selection. You were no longer available for emotional manipulation. You were no longer accessible to anyone who treated you as an option. And that was the moment the storm turned in your favor. Because when you master your reactions, you master the battlefield. They were playing checkers. You were playing chess. Every quiet moment was a calculated move. Every ignored insult was a strategic victory. They wanted a spectacle. You gave them mystery. As weeks turned into months, something incredible happened. You found peace, not the fragile kind that depends on others behaving well, but the unshakable kind that comes from knowing your worth. You began investing your energy in yourself. You read more. You trained harder. You created quietly. You healed intentionally. While they searched for attention, you built substance. While they competed for validation, you cultivated confidence. Your glow became undeniable, not loud, not flashy, but magnetic. People began noticing. New doors opened, new conversations sparked, new opportunities appeared. And the ones who once underestimated you, they watched from a distance, confused. How did the one who said nothing become the one everyone listens to? How did the quiet one become the strongest presence in the room? They didn't understand that silence is incubation, that retreat is preparation, that isolation can be transformation. There were moments you almost broke, moments you wanted to defend your name, moments you wanted to expose their lies, moments you wanted justice immediately. But you remembered something powerful. Your growth is louder than any argument. So you stayed focused. You let your results speak. You let your consistency speak. You let your peace speak. And slowly, your silence turned into authority. When you finally did speak, people leaned in because you had trained them to understand something. If you talk, it matters. You were no longer noise. You were signal. And now they see you differently. Not because you demanded respect, but because you required it. They feel your boundaries before you even state them. They sense your standards without explanation. Your silence built an aura of self-respect, an aura of discipline, an aura of inner mastery. You don't argue with people beneath your evolution. You don't chase people who walked away. You don't explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, because you learned the ultimate lesson. The loudest revenge is indifference. The strongest flex is peace. The ultimate victory is self-control. They thought silence meant defeat, but your silence was strategy. They thought you were withdrawing. You were recalibrating. They thought you were alone. You were rebuilding. And now you stand taller, not because you crushed them, but because you conquered yourself. You conquered the urge to react. You conquered the impulse to prove. You conquered the need to be understood by everyone. That is power. Real power is quiet. Real confidence doesn't beg for attention. Real strength doesn't announce itself. It simply exists, and it confuses those who rely on noise.